So that I was with the Corps for 12 years from 1990 to 2001, had 3 deployments to Iraq, Cambodia, and Bosnia, quite intense deployments. We had many incidents in Cambodia. We came under fire. We had shelling, you name it. It was pretty scary stuff, sometimes. You noticed that in a platoon, you weren't really allowed to be vulnerable because then you kind of let each other down. And yes, because we hid everything away, I thought it's okay. You know, it doesn't get to me. But anyway, in the end, we all know those intense situations. You have a buildup, you have an emotional backpack. I had one too. I wasn't aware of that backpack. But that backpack kept getting fuller in Cambodia with all the stuff we saw there. I myself was with the Marine Corps for 4 years. From 89 to 93 and 99, I was in Iraq, among other places. And I think that yes, there are very strong cultures within defense. There are many good aspects to it. There are also just unhappier sides to it, and rigid thinking that is useful in chaos because then you can think very structurally. But the world is not so structural, and if you then come into a civilian society where people have to talk about expressing needs and setting boundaries, while you've only been taught to push boundaries, yes, then you're out of your depth. Then it's a very alien world you're entering. And I think people struggle with that. I had identified myself with a role in the Marine Corps. I was the Marine Corps, and that was my role, and I was not able to switch back. Not to myself, not to civilian life. I was just an officer, the Marines, and that was my role. And that's how I actually dealt with those guys too, so there was no room for vulnerability because we simply hadn't learned that with each other. Yes, in the past 20 years there have been many conflicts. Many people have been deployed. I think that defense has a kind of, yes, is a combat organization, but still it is a very safe organization to be in psychologically. If I just look at myself in the Marine Corps, we spend 2 days in a psychological screening before we can even start the training. And then, of course, many people drop out. But then you have a lot of people who psychologically jump through the same hoop or are cut from the same cloth, more or less. And that's useful if you don't want social conflicts. If you're sitting with 10 people in the snow or something, you know, whether you're in the jungle or just imagine what all needs to happen. But when you leave that time behind and think, I'm starting a new chapter, yes, then you encounter a bit more psychological and cultural diversity in civilian society, which makes many people feel very unsafe. Their path can actually be quite difficult to find. And if there are incidents where the job, the partner, the house have an influence, yes, then it often quickly goes downhill. In 2012, I got divorced, and to this day, I am dealing with the name, both financially and with my daughter, whom I haven't seen for a few years now. And that has actually been my big struggle in recent years, and actually much more intense than the things I experienced in the Corps. I have nothing left. I am 50, and I have actually lost everything because of all the hassle, including my daughter. So yes, at a certain point, you don't feel very good anymore. Then there is continuous stress, training, and stress. And yes, so much that even my regular running and exercising helps temporarily, but not continuously, and I actually wanted to do something about that. so that I could generally feel calmer and more at ease instead of the constant rush all the time. All that stress and that anger and that sadness, yes, that needs to come out somehow. I want to do something with it, and eventually that's why I ended up here. In a beautiful area, Psychedelic Insights. And we provide psychological guidance for psychedelic experiences for personal transformation. And I myself spent 4 years with the Marine Corps. And we have also expressed a heartfelt wish to facilitate this kind of guidance for veterans in a safe way, in a fantastic forested environment in the middle of nature, with many experienced guides, many of whom are veterans themselves. I was a doctor with the Navy at the Marine Corps, and I have personally experienced that such a ceremony can be incredibly healing. Yes, I have simply experienced as a participant, but also as a guide, that you can create an incredibly safe setting with the people with whom we do this work. That invites vulnerability and invites to really feel deeply about what is alive in me, who am I, and that really woke me up. Abby has been researching psychedelics for the past 6 years, along with other altered states of consciousness. Most of our experiments take place in laboratories or clinical settings, but we are also venturing out more and more to examine the effects of psychedelics in retreat settings and during ceremonies. When I was approached as an external researcher to get involved with this specific trial pilot study with war veterans, I was excited on the one hand, and concerned as well. Since the 1990s, clinical trials with human subjects have reopened. Quite a lot of research has been done on the effect of psychedelics on depression, anxiety, and addictions, showing some efficacy, so we have data for it. However, to this day, there has not been a study targeting specifically military personnel or veterans with psilocybin. What I find very special is that we are here with people who actually come from a certain kind of pain. We are here with veterans, and we talk a lot with each other, and we all have our own story. We all have our own emotional backpack that I have talked about. I actually never considered doing this, but I did understand that it can potentially help to loosen your own feelings, and that the stress buildup in your system can be released, allowing you to better understand yourself and how that stress is in your body. On one hand, veterans seem like a suitable group for psychedelic treatment because we know there is an increase in mental health disorders after deployment, such as depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, addictions, and they also report having problems reintegrating back into society. They feel shielded in some way. On the other hand, there is of course the worry that this vulnerable group may experience trauma more likely during psychedelic experiences compared to the other non-clinical population. So this was one of our concerns as well. Perhaps veterans are going to be more likely to have a challenging psychedelic experience. With those psychedelics I had, in principle, I did have some prejudices against them. I was a bit apprehensive about it. I found it. I also found it a bit scary, so it wasn't something I immediately thought, oh, that seems interesting and let's do that. So that took a little while. It took a while before I really became interested in it. I actually also with psychedelics, I didn't really know them. I didn't really know what it was, only from TV and Netflix and I do know someone who has done it occasionally. I heard very special stories from that, but I found it very exciting that So I want to have control over everything, over myself. And I also had judgments about psychedelics but judgments fueled because I actually know nothing about it. Yes, you hear what you hear in the media, right? That's not always necessarily positive. And you sometimes hear from people, oh yes, they stay in the trip and they never become normal again. They end up in the madhouse. Well, if you delve into it a bit more, the situation is slightly different, and especially what we have done now with psilocybin. Yes, it is 111 mushroom that is also legal here. Well, that legal aspect, that was already a decisive factor. Here in the Netherlands, we have the great benefit called the truffle, previously the mushroom, which is now illegal. But the effects of it and the insights people can gain from using it, that is guided where people feel safe to go deeper into a sort of meditation in which you can have very deep columns of thoughts and a kind of unlocking of your subconscious where the pain is, where you don't really have light, where you can actually create a kind of fear that sometimes, yes, has a negative effect on our personality. That is actually unnecessary, and you can carry that with you for a lifetime. What I see with truffle is that people can go very deep and can see where they themselves are stuck. The retreat itself consisted of 2 psychedelic doses that were administered to the 9 participants. We have measured their well-being and mental health at baseline, so before the onset of the study and the retreat. And then they measured the quality of their experience after the first dose and after the second dose. And after that, we followed up with 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and a week measurements to see if their well-being and mental health have improved or bounced back, potentially back to normal. At one point, we were sitting together in a circle and the tea was made. And then you drink a cup of tea. I found it super exciting. It was really my first time. I thought, what am I going to do? So I found it very exciting, honestly. So you drink the tea and then, yes, it enters your system. And I really felt like, okay, let it come. I want to discover that uncertainty in myself, why I often had fear of doing things, and how exactly is that within myself. And can this kind of give me guidance on how it all works? So with that intention, I went in. Yes. And then you lie on a bed with a blindfold on. Yes. And then it kicks in. And then, yes, for me, it became kind of quite bizarre because I did have the intention to, so to speak, find the darkness within myself. So that kind of came to the surface. And I was like, okay, bring it on. I'm ready for it. But it turned out to be not so bad. And then I was bathed in a fantastically beautiful warm light. And it was kind of, yes, a kind of coming home, actually. What I had always felt as a child, I felt again now, because as a child, I was very sensitive and perceptive, and that along the way really turned inward, and I did nothing with it. But through this experience, I noticed, hey, wait a minute, it's okay. There is so much more. There is so much power within ourselves. And I find that a very beautiful, powerful realization. Like, okay, this is all possible. This is indeed all possible. And that's where you're going now. And that is a very beautiful message to share with others, because everyone potentially has more skills within them. The experience itself, yes, it is very intense. I am a 50 years. I am a tough guy and spent 12 years in the Marine Corps, and then another 16 years with the UN as an armed security officer all over the world. And I really thought I was brave, but this was one of the toughest things I had to break through to get to this point. The most important thing is, do you want to do something with this? And do you really want insight into the problems, into what is going on, and try to come back into a better balance with yourself and your environment? Then that requires a courage, the guts to completely expose yourself. For me personally, that was the most difficult. Completely open. No more walls around you. Show what is there, where that pain is. Luke was able to support me at the beginning of the trip because I was still a bit stuck, and at a certain point I said, I find it very difficult, and Luke helped convince me that it's okay, let yourself go through it, go along with it. And I could. During the trip, I could still tell myself that, okay, it's intense, it feels heavy, but you're not here for nothing. Let it go. Let it come out. Well, and that coming out, that started then, so to speak. And I don't know how long, because time is hard to estimate at a certain point. But I have the idea that I kept crying. I cried as long as a child, so intensely. Actually, not like a child, much more intensely. I cried like an adult, let me put it that way, like a man. So that... A very beautiful trip. I feel like you've become completely new within yourself. You've made a very beautiful discovery. And I think you can continue with that. You can also continue to grow as a person. If you're listening to this now and everything is a bit difficult, or you have no writing inspiration at all, or you have no inspiration for a moment, this afternoon is about writing inspiration and what I take from my 5 scripted, because it was like that. It was so terribly intense. And all the pain and the sadness and the emotion I felt with my daughter, the perspective from their point of view, how they see things, but also with my ex, whom I actually haven't seen for a long time, and with whom I do have a negative vibe. But even from that, I could see where her pain was, and I understood where why she did what she did towards me. Towards you, yes, it is very enlightening and not numbing. You start to feel more instead of less. And feeling more brings you a lot. Insights that actually help you move forward. People become more connected and have more peace with painful situations. More awareness of what they have control over and what not. It is an enormously emotional and profound picture of the emotions and the grief that is at play there. And that is told to you, and then you get, yes, it sounds very strange to outsiders, but at a certain point you gain clarity in that. That's how the situation is. That's how it fits together. And I must also say that what you also realize is that I have done certain things wrong, that I have been wrong about certain things, and that I simply have not done things well. That it is also important that I communicate that. I won't do that tomorrow, but it will happen. I will also show there, okay, this is what's going on, and I want to share this with you. And yes, surrender to, and admit that mistakes have been made. Because yes, that's where it is. That's also where the wall is. You're like, okay, I want to do it my way and keep going like this. And I don't want anything to do with you anymore. But you have to, of course. In the end, you have to do it together. That is, you have to work it out together. And that insight that I have gained from this, the end. So in terms of the experiences that participants had, and after examining the qualitative data, we can speculate there are kind of like the three common themes that the soldiers reported, and we've seen in other literature: a sense of connectedness with themselves, the society. The other participants have been reported commonly. Secondly, participants reported being able to sit through their emotions and not avoid them. This is called experiential avoidance, which is a root cause of many psychological issues, and basically trying to sit through emotions and approach them is part of many therapeutic trainings. Another thing that we saw in the data, and even at 2 months follow-up, which was really positive, is that participants reported having better control over their thoughts and behavior. So even long-term. So it is not like old habits would not come up in their mind, but they felt there's more space between the action and the thought, and they could have acted differently. So the ability to change their habits has been persistently reported even at 2 months follow-up. Yes, how it can be, I don't know, of course. I am not a specialist in the workings of psychedelics. But yes, it is there. Probably. I also think that knowledge is in there somewhere. You know things. It's that mushroom that clarifies things. That shows you, listen, you already knew it, but look here. It's kind of pointed out to you, also in that trip, that's where the pain is. That's how it works. That's how it's put together. That's the relationship. And yes, because that clarity and clearness, that is, as far as I'm concerned, that was so overwhelming that it, mind-blowing, really fucking mind-blowing. People in the staff found the psychedelic experience deeply meaningful. 2 of them reported that the experience was the most meaningful experience of their life to date. 5 of them reported it was among the top 5 most significant experiences in their life. What was interesting about it is that while these experiences can be very mystical and whimsical and sort of introspective, they still trusted fully. All 9 of them fully trusted the content of the experience, even at 2 months follow-up. And they have reported recounting and thinking about the experience a couple of times a week, even at 3 months follow-up. So that just shows how profound these experiences can really be and how much trust people put in them. My trip really consisted of 2 aspects. The first was the most intense. The second part, let me put it this way, was perhaps a bit more cheerful and lighter, but no less intense. Let me put it this way, my inquiry or my intention for this trip was also, besides gaining insight into the pain and sadness of my daughter and what surrounds it, also the place in the universe. Where am I? What am I actually doing here? And how do things work and what are we doing here? And just show it. That's how I went in. That's really how I went in. And I got that too. I really received that very intensely. A continuous yes. You also can't explain this well in words because you see things you've never experienced before, but a combination of colors, figures, impressions, music, everything mixed through. What is new is almost impossible to explain, but for me, it was a fantastic experience to go through that. Most of the participants, I think it was 50%, have reported having a full-blown mystical experience, if you may, so associated with some spiritual transcendence. For others, the experience was very introspective, so they would be evaluating their life and their relationships with others that they found inherently healing, as well as they could look at their role in life from different perspectives. The question was, where do I stand in the universe? Well, I can't explain it, but I do know. I've experienced it, I am immersed, as they say. At a certain point, you get a kind of warm blanket over you of, okay, this is it, you are taken into the being. And as I'm talking like this, I think, damn, I sound like a hippie, but I now know where it comes from. Because it's incredible to experience what is around us. And that unity, that you see at a certain point, and was really an almost religious experience. So it was definitely of our concern that traumatic experiences and more challenging experiences may occur in such a vulnerable group of veterans. So we were quite surprised and pleasantly surprised when we found out that from the 18 experiences reported, only 2 of them have been reported to be as challenging according to a standardized measure of challenging experiences. And both of these experiences were at the same time acknowledged by the participants actually as being helpful. And they would not change them. They actually thought that they helped them to come to the core of their issues and were helpful in their treatment afterwards. I think that we should embrace all the research. I think it's really a great thing that in the Netherlands, the truffle is legal. And I think we should cherish that with respect, because the rest of the world is still looking for a way to make that available again. So yes, I think we should indeed just be open about what this does, right? It's not for sick people. It is for people who are into self-development, who want insight into their own inhibitions, right? It often has to do with security, with safety. So what ghosts are in the broom closet? Well, I think there is a lot to gain by looking with a more open mind and working less defensively in healthcare in general. And not to judge things you don't know, because I think that's what happens a lot. Western medicine is really good for acute care for many things, but alternative and complementary care also adds a lot. So actually, it's just, yes, you have to do it together. You need both, so to speak. I work as a knowledge worker within the Special Operations Warfare Center, and there we work on a human performance program. And what we do there is look at how the special operations operator is prepared for the future. And we look at the year 2035 and we view it with a holistic vision. So we don't just look at physical and mental performance, certainly, but also emotional intelligence, a bit of leadership, and we do this to try to ensure that our operator of the future, so to speak, is empowered and that we can also retain people in the organization longer. Through this experience, I've realized that I can and may trust myself, and from there, I can also connect with others. I wish this for everyone, not only within the defense, but also outside of it. And if you ask me, what does your beautiful picture look like in 2 years? It is awareness of your own mental backpack and knowing what's inside, and that you can apply emotional management. I truly wish this for the organization, because with that, you can generate a lot of power without us all ending up with PTSD cases. Because now they are coming in droves. You see it with Afghanistan. It pops up. It pops up because now everything is in view. Negative. Everyone starts thinking back to their own period. And that emotional backpack, it kind of opens up, and it's in the system. While if you completely turn it around, you can actually bring that in. If you have experienced an intense situation with your platoon or section and reflect on it almost immediately afterward and are allowed to let the emotions go, then it leaves your system. The same as what animals do, they shake it off. We never learned that, but it's not rocket science. It's about opening up so it can go away. And then you can move on, and I am convinced that this can greatly reduce PTSD. I mean that awareness. I guide, besides my work as a coach, people with PTSD, and I have experienced people who were very, very heavily sedated with medication and thus completely disconnected from their own core. And I know that there are other resources, are much more natural products that can bring people to their core. And I am convinced that if you resort to these kinds of means, you can quickly bring people to that piece of trauma and make them aware of the way out, so to speak. And I believe that you can embrace the means available to bring people into that. We were really excited to see that after the retreat, a 2-week follow-up showed his PTSD symptoms dropped by 1/3, and at a 1-month follow-up by 1/4. So they only went up a little bit, and that was sustained over the period of 2 months. Secondly, we have seen a very high elevated level of generalized anxiety in our sample, and it was actually quite remarkable that after the 2 doses, we have seen a dramatic drop in generalized anxiety of 80%. So there was almost no anxiety 2 weeks reported by these veterans after the retreat. However, the anxiety levels have increased over time, then again in 1 month and 2 months. Follow-up, which shows that psychedelics are not a magic pill. There can be a climb up in these symptoms. However, we have seen really good results for the scores of depression. There were a lot of depressed participants in this trial. We have seen a drop of 25% in depression scores according to clinical questionnaires, and that drop sustained over the period of 2 months of follow-up. A quite remarkable finding was about the social connections we measured. So what we found was that participants reported feeling much more connected to society, to themselves, and to their loved ones after the experience. And on average, the score improved by 50%. So that is a really big jump. And that continued for the 2 months follow-up, and in general, they reported an 18% improvement in general well-being, resilience, and so on. So these findings were very promising. We have to keep in mind there was a really small pilot study with 9 participants, but the fact that we did not see any adverse effects in such a vulnerable group is promising for future research. I see in my environment that more and more research is being conducted, and I really support that because we really need to come up with facts to let's say, the way of this therapy, so to speak, to support it with results. Because there is also a certain resistance in society to these kinds of alternative medications. And we can and should remove that with thorough research. That's why I embrace this program. I think there is increasing interest from various cultures or organizations to the effects of psychedelics. Many watchful eyes, but genuine interest. Because there are very few things that are truly transformative in a way that is as remarkable as what is happening now with psychedelics. If you look at the research, you see what is happening in America and Canada. Yes, those are often heartwarming testimonials that people often have after just one session. The results were very promising, and I think that they should open more doors for more research, especially with veterans, but not only in clinical settings, but also beyond. What we see is that now psychedelics are becoming very medicalized, and I think that's why doing research at retreats, and which is facilitating good aftercare and so on, is very valuable, because the future of psychedelics might benefit from both models. Clinical model for patients as well as subclinical population, as burnout. Depression and anxiety are things that burden the economic system. There is still a lot of work to be done, and we need to start somewhere. And I think that we as SOV operators can take the lead in this. I believe that many people will benefit, and many people can be helped who are indeed in endless, are stuck in circles with medication. And which actually leaves no way out. And that is also what my motivation is. I wish this for them. You face a lot of resistance, but the results are very conciliatory. You get cold showers because you stand for something that instills a lot of fear. But when you hear people's stories and you look into their eyes and you hold them in your arms, and then you know that a very happy, loving, patient, warmer dad or mom goes home soon. And that's what I do it for. Yes.